I've always believed that the meanness, the true meanness that went on in my state went on in that period before the Civil Rights Movement, before there was a light being shone on it.
The whole atmosphere was a racist atmosphere. It's hard for people who do not grow up here to realize that when we grew up, we took in racism with our mother's milk. It started from the beginning, and you had to either go with it or unlearn it somewhere along the way.
She wrote the book that explained us to ourselves, and she put it in a beautiful story.
I thought she was extremely courageous to write that book about her hometown. Of course, she said it was fiction, but we could identify some of the characters from people in town and from the town, what she said about it.
And then you find out that there's another book that's just been in the proverbial sock drawer, and we just didn't know it existed.
Monroeville, Alabama, population 6,519, renamed Macomb for the setting of one of the most beloved and celebrated novels of all time. To Kill a Mockingbird, a staple of middle school English classes, it has sold 40 million copies worldwide in 40 different languages. Its publication in 1960 won 34-year-old author Harper Lee a Pulitzer Prize and made her a household name, though folks who know her call her Nell.
You be good, children.
The movie that followed, 2 years later, won Gregory Peck an Academy Award and a permanent position in the pantheon of great American, albeit fictional, heroes.
You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view.
Sir?
Till you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it.
He's the standard that we've been judging Southern men by. And all Southern men, of course, are falling short because Atticus is fiction. He may have been drawn from real life, but he's fiction.
The story is a microcosm of the segregated South in the mid-1930s. The racism.
You felt sorry for her. A white woman?
Narrow-mindedness.
Dill, I don't want you playing around that house over there. There's a maniac lives there, and he's dangerous.
See?
And crushing poverty of a rural Alabama town in the grips of the Depression.
I didn't want to bother you none. I brung you these here hickory nuts as part of my entailment.
All told through the eyes of a 6-year-old named Scout, Harper Lee's young alter ego.
Nell Harper Lee, who was, of course, a tomboy and loved nothing better than fighting, she would beat the heck out of any boy, or at least try.
Another celebrated writer, who happened to live next door to Lee, also shows up in the novel.
You look right puny for going on 7. I'm little, but I'm old. Folks call me Dale.
In the case of Truman Capote, Harper Lee called him Sissy Britches. Everybody called him Sissy Britches. He's diminutive, he doesn't want to fight, he doesn't take up for himself, he's an outsider.
He's Dill.
He's Dill.
I was sitting on the porch and he come along.
When Hollywood produced this movie, they took everything in this courthouse and they replicated.
Exactly.
In the name of God, do your duty.
The story, the characters, the actors, and most of all, the author, became part of the American cultural landscape and put Monroeville on the map, warts and all. The Courthouse Museum is an homage to Lee and the town's celebrity status, a source of pride amidst its struggling economy.
This is a working class town. This is a town of blue-collar people. The education system's not very good. They worked so hard here at trying to save this place.
After To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee never wrote another novel. Overwhelmed by the invasion of privacy that followed the success of Mockingbird, she retreated from the public eye, granting her last interview in 1964.
What was your reaction to the success of To Kill a Mockingbird? I often wondered how an author who wrote what became an immediate smash would react.
Well, my reaction to it was not one of surprise, it was one of sheer numbness. It was one of being hit over the head and knocked cold.
Why worry about the money? Why worry about the fans? Why worry about the adulation when you're selling 1 million copies a year of a book 50 years after it was published, and it has transcended its origins to become a literary classic everywhere in the world? Why bother with anything else?
They love the idea of a woman who wrote this perfect book, this near perfect book, and then just said, okay, see y'all. You know, I'm glad you liked it. Now I'm going to do some other things.
Then suddenly last February, news that a long-lost manuscript was going to be published swept the nation and the world.
It's a bombshell in the book world.
Before she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, she had written this other novel.
American author Harper Lee is publishing a second novel.
People here in Monroeville were just surprised.
Surprised and suspicious because Harper Lee had reportedly said on a number of occasions she would never publish another novel. She moved back home following a stroke 8 years ago and now lives in an assisted living facility called The Meadows. At 89, she suffers from macular degeneration and deafness.
As far as her ability to effectively give her consent, I have my serious doubts.
I can't see Miss Harper Lee just bringing that book right out on her own.
I was frankly astonished that there wasn't total celebration, that there was almost immediately an element of doubt. But I can also understand it now because I think people had come to see this novel as the perfect novel that was the only novel written by Harper Lee. So to have that narrative changed by this discovery is disturbing.
But some have found the discovery of the novel itself disturbing. Initially, it was reported that Harper Lee's attorney, Tanya Carter, had found it in August of last year, attached to an original manuscript of Mockingbird. But new reports suggest the discovery could have been made much earlier, in October of 2011, when an appraiser from Sotheby's and Lee's agent, Samuel Pincus, who she has since fired, found what they believed was an early version of Mockingbird in her safe deposit box. They say Tanya Carter was there at the time, but she told us in a statement she was not in the room when the manuscript was reviewed. To further complicate matters, it's unclear if Harper Lee's sister Alice, who was her lawyer for many years, knew of the discovery of Watchmen or approved of its release. She died in November of 2014, 3 months before the new book was announced. Meanwhile, Sam Pincus, the Sotheby's appraiser, and Tanya Carter all declined to be interviewed for this story. The state launched an investigation into whether Harper Lee was in fact mentally competent to agree to the book's publication. But according to investigators who interviewed her, she was coherent and repeatedly said she wanted the book published.
All I know is members of the family felt this is probably not a good idea. And when they said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" 5 times in 2 days, she said, "Of course." Yes, it's amazing.
Wayne Flint is a highly respected Alabama historian and professor emeritus at Auburn University. He became friendly with Lee when she moved back to Alabama and has visited her more than 100 times since they met. He last saw her the day before we sat down, and although he hasn't read the book, they did discuss her big news earlier this year.
Oh, I hear your new novel is coming out. And she said, what new novel? And I think, oh my goodness, she doesn't have any memory of the novel at all. And after the clarification, and I gave her the title, she said, that's not my new novel, that's my old novel. We were at King Lear a couple of weeks ago at the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, and after the first act, I came in at intermission, I said, now, you could be King Lear. You know, King Lear is mad. And she said, and you could be my fool. Then everybody in the patrons lounge was, you know, double over with laughter. And I think, well, I've been put in my place.
When I went to see her, one of the things I was most impressed with was the fact that her room was full of books. She has a machine which works as a kind of magnifying screen, so the page is blown up. And she was in the middle of reading several books at the same time. She was reading the Guardian newspaper. She has a lively interest in the world around her.
Reading has long been a passion of Harper Lee's, but writing was her life's ambition. So in 1949, when she was 23, she moved from Monroeville to Manhattan to write, joining her friend Truman Capote. She supported herself working as a ticket agent for Eastern Airlines until some friends left a check hanging on their Christmas tree.
Truman Capote was the key to it because Truman introduced her to his friends including Michael and Joy Brown, Texans, so they were Southerners. They're the ones who put a check on the Christmas tree after he'd sold the lyrics to a new play. And the check was enough money for her to quit her job for a year and spend all of her time writing.
And write she did, finishing her first manuscript, which she called Go Set a Watchman. Her editor was more interested in the character of Jean Louise as a 6-year-old girl and encouraged Lee to go back and tell the whole story from that point of view. To Kill a Mockingbird was born. There were flashbacks in Go Set a Watchman that were the younger version of Scout?
That's exactly right. There are 3 sections in Go Set a Watchman which are set during the early life of Scout, who is called Jean Louise in Watchmen. They're standalone pieces.
Reese Witherspoon, a Southerner and fan of Harper Lee, recorded the audio version of the newly discovered novel.
It's a continuation of a story that people hold very closely, but the most moving part of recording the audiobook was definitely getting to say Harper Lee's prose. It's just so lyrical and quintessentially Southern.
Does it feel raw, unedited, unpolished, if you will?
No, it feels like a novel that has been completed and may perhaps it could have been revised, but as it stands, it's very much a complete work of art. Jean Louise, who is Scout as a grown woman, is a 26-year-old girl working in New York City who goes back to her hometown of Macomb and visits her father, strikes up old friendships, visits characters that we remember from Kill a Mockingbird. It's the story of that particular visit and what happens on that visit. It's a novel by a 26-year-old who is feeling passionately about the issues of her day, and it has that power.
What is she reading on the front page of the New York Times about her world? What are people saying when she goes out to a play? When they're saying, where are you from now? I'm from Alabama. Oh my God, you're from Alabama. What's happening to Alabama? If the new book is about politics, if the new book is about the Montgomery bus boycott, if it's about the terrorism that's spread across Alabama, if it's about a sniper who shoots a pregnant black woman on a bus in Montgomery, if it's about terrorists who bombed 4 churches in Montgomery in 1955-56, 33 bombings in Birmingham between the late 40s and the early 60s.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Think George Wallace. That's the world that she's writing about in 1955, 56, 57.
Can you describe what the segregated South in the 1950s was like for us?
Yeah, well, there were no black-owned restaurants, and we could not go to the white ones. I do remember going into a store to buy a dress, and I was told that I would have to try the dress on over my clothes. We could not use the public library. Waiting rooms were all segregated.
People are free. It's not lost on anyone involved in the book's publication that it's being released in the middle of such a tumultuous and explosive moment for race relations in America.
There will be an extraordinarily complicated reaction to the book. I think people will have strong feelings about it because it actually has real relevance, real topicality in its treatment of race. So I think it'll incite incredible discussion and conversation and argument.
How did you react to some of the themes and some of the attitudes that were inherent in the plot and in the characters?
It shocked me as being a modern woman in 2015 reading some of the words, I think, but I had to keep, reminding myself it was written in the 50s. And these were the complex issues that people of the day were dealing with. And old attitudes and modern thinking was just evolving about race relations in our country. So I think you will feel all that complexity in the piece.
Miss Jean Louise? Miss Jean Louise, stand up. Your father's passed.
So Atticus Finch will not be the noble man we came to know and love?
Well, who knows at this point? Having written 10 books on Alabama in the 20th century, having known Nell and Nell's view of tolerance and acceptance and racial justice, no, she's not happy with Atticus Finch. She's not happy with Coley Lee, her father. She's going back to confront Monroe, to confront her father, I think.
You will have to read the book to find out the truth.
Are you worried, though, about bursting that bubble? Because isn't he sort of the ultimate hero and father figure for eternity?
That could be a way of seeing it, but I think anybody who reads the novel will come to a deeper understanding of him and the attitudes of people in the South at that time. So it's a novel that really, it has many nuances and many subtleties. So I anticipate a strong reaction, but I think people should read the novel for themselves.
HarperCollins has ordered an initial printing of more than 2 million copies, while bookstores across the country are planning parties and celebrations. Pre-orders have already made Watchmen a bestseller, and its author stands to make millions of dollars. The original manuscript is estimated to be worth in the millions as well. It seems fitting that during this summer of our discontent, we'll now witness Harper Lee, some 60 years ago, reconcile herself with the sins of her father and the painful history of the South. The title, from Isaiah 21, verse 6, a reflection of who she was and may very well still be.
For thus the Lord said to me, go set a watchman, let him announce what he sees.
What was the watchman for Nell?
The watchman for Nell was the one who is going back to the people and watch for what is going wrong and telling them, you've got to change. It's to confront them. It's to say, the enemy is at the gate. And the enemy is yourself.
She took the worst of us and the best of us and made it clear which one we wanted to be. Who gets to do that? And who gets to do that in a lifetime?